It's, I mean, even in Clinton impeachment, I've never seen it. It's sustained. So people now realize elections really have consequences, and maybe I can't be quite as passive as I've been in the past. So there's a truth.
Thanks. My name is Erica, and my kids and I are a Churchill family. My concern is Jeff Sessions and the Justice Department. I'm really concerned. I see that there's a lot of rolling back about LGBTQ rights, voting rights, oversight of law enforcement, private prisons. So I'm curious, what is the recourse and what can we do?
Well, he's very, very hard right on many issues. I think you mentioned last prisons. I mean, the Obama administration said, no, we're going to phase out private prisons. They want to bring back private prisons, which are full of abuse and all sorts of other problems. Plus, they actually ultimately cost us more. I mean, it's kind of like, does this make sense? In terms of LGBTQ, Trump sent out that weird tweet about transgender in the military and said, I've consulted with my generals, and all the generals are like, we hadn't heard about it. In fact, the commandant of the Coast Guard today said, not on my watch. So I think if you look at the inside baseball, here's what was going on. The House Freedom Caucus offered an amendment, an anti-transgender amendment on the defense authorization bill. We beat it, just barely, but we beat it, which no one expected. They got very upset about that, and they went to the White House and said, look, we are not going to vote for the defense authorization bill because the Democrats and a couple of dozen Republicans defeated our amendment. And so then Trump puts out that tweet. And so then they said, okay, we'll vote for it. But as the Pentagon said, we don't make policy on tweets. So right now, there's no change in policy, and I think that's the end of it. He got what he wanted. This guy is in the moment. He had an obstacle. He got rid of the obstacle. And if you look at his history, I mean, he was the guy who wrapped himself in the rainbow flag and said he was going to do better than Hillary during the campaign. So, I mean, it's true. You can see it online. I mean, he actually did, and there was some bizarre quote. So, and then working back from there, I would hope that, I mean, Sessions is also talking about, he's obsessed with marijuana. He saw the Reefer Madness movie when he was a kid. It was the first talkie he ever saw. And, so he thinks that, I mean, he is really of the opinion that, this is what's led to the opioid epidemic in America, where actually, people are being able to avoid or get off opioids who have true pain problems by using marijuana without the hallucinogenic part, but just the CBD part. So there's a whole lot of things going on there. Whether they're going to let him go after the states, that's going to be, I think that would be very contentious, but unfortunately we're mostly blue states. So maybe, but I think it would be very politically perilous for them. And then finally, he did at least recuse himself from the investigation of the Russian meddling. So for that, I got to give him some credit, even though I don't like his policies. And that was the one kind of only good thing I can come up with about it. So, go ahead, Richard. Go back that way. Maybe it's or over there. There's someone right in the front row. No, she's pointing to someone else in the front row. So. Okay, all right, okay.
Hi, Mr. DeFazio. You voted for case law, which is a law that the ACLU described as unjust and wasteful. Mm-hmm. It puts a 5-year mandatory minimum sentence on a third re-entry, illegal re-entry, or an undocumented re-entry after committing a crime, which could be something like failing to show up in court. Mm-hmm. We know that these mandatory minimums don't serve the deterrent.
Right.
And
I don't support mandatory minimums in the bill.
And
the bill does not mandate. The bill does not mandate new mandatory minimums. It allows a judge with discretion, but it does not mandate mandatory minimums. I'm sorry, but you're incorrect on that.
My apologies.
Yeah.
Why did you support this bill?
It was actually part of the comprehensive immigration reform bill, which passed the Senate, which I supported in the House, which is to deal with, there are some very bad people who come across the border multiple times. I think that guy had 5 felony convictions, then he killed an innocent woman. And they just kept deporting him instead of, putting him in prison. And so there are some people who deserve that, but we're leaving the discretion up to the judges. And that, I think, is fair. So it was part of the comprehensive reform bill, which said, okay, we're going to toughen some things up here, but over here we're going to have DACA, over here we're going to have a path to citizenship, and we're going to have this there. It was a balanced bill, and this was part of that bill, and I hope we get back to that. So, thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. DeFazio, thank you. My name is Jen. I'm from the Democratic Socialists of America. I have a question for you. I'm so excited that we have a political science a student as our representative. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm very resistant to higher education.
But as someone who has studied political science, I'd like to know where you stand on opening the primaries in Oregon.
We've experimented with that, and if you're talking about one party allowing people from another party to vote in their primaries, the Democrats did it one election, the Republicans did another election, not much result. But if you're talking about a top 2 primary, I'm absolutely adamantly opposed to it. What a top 2 primary means is you'll never have a minority party. You will take a district like mine, which is one of the 45 congressional districts that's competitive, Hillary winning it by 554 votes, and I would have to run 2 general elections a year, which doubles the cost of running, and I've already run against Robert Mercer from Wall Street a number of times here, who keeps funding Art Robinson or will fund somebody else and now has funded Trump. So I'm pretty happy with the system we have today. And if you're a member of a party, you get to nominate someone. Some of the smaller parties still get to nominate people at conventions. But saying, gee, we're going to open up, the whole thing, and there's mischief that has happened in these things where people decide to choose a weaker party candidate on the other side of the aisle, and they say, everybody vote for this person because they'll lose to our candidate. So I don't see any reason why, if you want to be a Democratic Socialist or you want to be a Libertarian or that, you get an opportunity to put people on the ballot under the current system, but under that system, a top 2 or other things like that, you'll never get that opportunity.
May I ask a quick follow-up question? Yeah. It's more because if we had someone from a marginalized population run, a marginalized person, their opportunities to be able to get into the neoliberal machine right now are kind of limited if they're poor. For a poor person like me, it is very limited. But if we did open the primaries and have that ability, it really would help.
Well, look, I'm a Democrat, and the Democratic Party of Lane County would be happy to have you come to meetings and participate and be an activist and do whatever you want. So, but I just don't think that we should say that Republicans can vote, without, the consent of the Democratic Party in Democratic primaries or others. I think Oregon has a pretty good system. We might disagree over that. So, anyway, thanks very much. We've neglected this side for a long time, and Dan's pointing over that way, so go ahead. I wish we had more microphones, but at least we have microphones for work.
Thank you very much for being here. I'm Christy Wild, longtime resident of Eugene, but only 2nd generation as a citizen. You mentioned DACA earlier, and it feels right now like the priorities for immigration and the way that we're treating refugees in this country is unbalanced. What do you think is the answer to get this right and get this better as far as a legal path for naturalization?
Well, I supported the comprehensive bill, which did pass the Senate, and I think had they brought it up in the House, it would have passed the House. It was tough. You know, if you came in illegally, it was essentially a 10-year path to citizenship, but you had a path and you had legal status in the interim. You know, it was shorter for DACA for kids, for people who were brought in as youth. It was, I think it was 5 years for youth, and they had legal status in the interim while qualifying for full citizenship. That's the way to deal. We need a comprehensive bill. I still believe if you brought up a comprehensive bill, I mean, I think in the last Congress, I can't say every, but almost every Democrat was on the comprehensive reform bill, and a few Republicans. But I think if we brought it up for a vote, you would get more Republicans who would vote for it. Their right wing wouldn't, and others, but they don't want to jeopardize, you know, their base. I mean, this goes back to something I referenced earlier, which is gerrymandering. The House has been gerrymandered so that districts, unlike mine, but most districts have been turned totally red or totally blue. So on the totally blue districts, people are worried about someone from the left. The totally red districts, which are mostly Republican districts, they're worried about someone from the right. And so they're worried about, even though they might believe in immigration reform, well, I might get a primary if I vote for immigration reform. So the Republican leadership has said, we're protecting our members, we're not going to vote on that stuff. But it's not protecting the country. I mean, we have, the estimates are 10 to 13 million people here with uncertain status, who are often abused in employment if they have a job, and I mean, you know, there's a whole host of other issues that need to be dealt with and dealt with honestly, but we're not there right now. So. Yeah. Okay. So give her that one, and then the gentleman down back in the wheelchair has really been. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Hillary Kittleson, and I am concerned about the acute partisanship that we've seen over the past year. And I'm wondering, is this an opportunity, given that the GOP hasn't been able to actually float anything successfully, do you think there's some opportunity for bipartisanship now where GOP plus some Democrats or however can make some stuff happen? Good stuff happen?
Well, you know, again, what I referenced is the gerrymandering and the fear of primaries is what's holding them back. You know, I mentioned my 3 bills on infrastructure. You know, I talked to Paul Ryan and I said, Paul, if we just index the gas tax, we can borrow this. No, you can't do that. You know, I'll sign the no tax pledge. And so, but the rank and file say something different to me. If I can get a Freedom Caucus person to support the bill, I mean, come on. So I think there are opportunities there, but their leadership is, you know, a little bit dyspeptic or short-sighted or something, and they think they're protecting their members, but what they're doing is preventing us from doing anything meaningful. There's a group of 43 members of the House who proposed some minimal but stabilizing reforms to the Affordable Care Act, which would then give us breathing space to talk about more major reforms to the Affordable Care Act without it collapsing artificially. And so they published that just in the last couple of days. So, but the leadership said, "Oh, we always appreciate people's suggestions. Thanks." So that was Ryan's spokesperson. So I don't know. I mean, I hope springs eternal. I wouldn't keep putting these things out there and keep pushing if I didn't think we could do it. I mean, we do have a procedure in the House that's never been successful since I've been there, which is to force a vote on something with 218 people signing a petition. So we've tried that numerous times. We tried that on the immigration reform bill and others. We just couldn't get enough people to break ranks on a partisan basis to do it. But, you know, at some point, maybe it'll take another election. We'll hopefully begin to work a little bit more together. So, yep. Okay.
When are you going to stop blaming Russia for your election loss?
I haven't mentioned Russia for my election loss, sir. Could you give that gentleman the...
Thank you much. Thank you, Peter. Hope you're doing great. Hope you're peaceful, effective, and highly empowered during this difficult time. My name is Moshe Immerman. I'm a professional research ecologist, park ranger for national parks. My mail has been stolen for 9 months plus in the downtown post office. And I've asked your staff to help, and I'm sad to say They took a bad situation and made it much, much worse. I'm not critical, but I want your staff to empower you and work for us. The person of interest I documented who's helped to steal my credit cards, driver's license, government mail, the Postal Service put him in charge of the investigation. And no one from your staff called me back about it, including your mail person, Chris Conroy. I'd like to talk to you about this so we can empower your staff to support you. Briefly I'm president of Fukushima Awareness Project. I'd like to brief you about what I've discovered going on right here in Oregon relative to Fukushima. KLCC, OPB will not cover it. Our danger level is very great, and let's talk about it so we can prevent the next problem. So let's empower your staff. We'd like help with the Postal Service too. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Okay, well, my casework director is right behind you, Phyllis Wagner. We can start with the conversation there. So thanks very much for your questions. I appreciate it. Thank you for turning out. More planes in the system, get them closer together and obviate delays, but they blame the FAA. And I said, well, we'll get the system. And they're very angry that I kind of brought this point up. But the bottom line is we pay for the current system with a ticket tax, which is a progressive tax, 7.5% of your ticket. So if you buy a $200 ticket, $15. You buy a $1,000 ticket, $75. And that pays for running the whole system. And for years, the airlines have said to me, that's our money. And I said, no, it's not your money. I pay the tax. Then it goes to the government. We run this. No, it's our money. It's our money. 5 years ago, the ticket tax expired for 2 weeks because of the former people on the system. And they had to shut down massive parts of it to do emergency repairs. And it's like that. And our highways, 40% of the highways, national highway system needs not just resurfacing, but it has to actually be dug up and rebased because it's deteriorated to that point. And then finally, our bridges, we've got 140,000 bridges that need repair replacement. This would be a great boost to the economy, create a lot of jobs. People say to me, Congressman, I'm working construction. I said, well, engineering, design, small business, suppliers, high tech, manufacturing. I just visited a company today, JCI down south of Springfield, employs 280 people. Average wage is $45,000 plus health insurance plus a matching for their retirement plans. They make rock crushers, and rock crushers, their market right now, because of the last highway bill, is pretty good. They said if you could pass your bill, we could employ a lot more people and build a lot more machinery. So I called the chief guy at the White House in charge of infrastructure investment. I said, look, DJ, name's DJ Driven. I said, you guys are having trouble getting the Republicans and agreeing with the Republicans. I'm giving you like a gift here. This is me agreeing with the Freedom Caucus and conservative Republicans and saying, do these things. It gives you $570 billion of real investment in infrastructure. Oh, everything's on the table. Well, unfortunately, and then I'll stop and we'll take questions, but just so you know where we're at. A guy named Gary Cohn is head of the President's Economic Council, former president of Goldman Sachs, has become totally enamored with the idea of asset recycling. Now, asset recycling is what we have traditionally called privatization. And what he's saying is, well, if Oregon would just sell I-5 to a private company and allow them to toll it, they can then take that money and they can invest it in other infrastructure. And I said, well, actually, yeah, thank you for the red cards. Hey, green cards, you can leave now, but it's a really dumb idea. This is being pushed by the Australians who did it for 2 years and then stopped doing it, but their pension fund really wants to buy assets in the United States. It's called Macquarie. And so their ambassador has sold it to Cohn. Cohn is pushing it. And I said, so after we sell it once and we spend the money to build something, then what do we do next to maintain it or build something else? I said, do we sell it again? And I said, maybe we need a sustainable funding source. He says, oh yeah, mate. I said, isn't your gas tax 4 times ours? Oh, that's right, mate. And I said, well, thanks very much. You guys didn't do it for more than 2 years. We're never going to do it. So that's the kind of things I would get. Oh, one more. That unfortunately, this has been the obsession of my chairman. Instead of working on all these other things that might create jobs, he's totally obsessed with privatizing air traffic control in the United States. And This is a sweet one. I mean, it's based on a lie. They say we have a 1950s system based on radar. No, actually, we're one of only 2 countries in the world that have a GPS-based night. This is great. Thank you to the sound people. I was in Roseburg last night. The high school and the sound system didn't work, so I pretty much lost my voice. Thanks to Dr. Balderas and 4J for allowing us to use this facility tonight and turning on the AC, which is on every day. So it's August. The poor Senate is stuck in Washington doing, as far as I can tell, much of nothing. But the House is out, although we didn't do much May either. But I'm home, and I'm going to do a series of town halls around the district. And I just want to talk a little bit about what's been going on, what might go on, and then spend most of the time on your questions. Obviously the thing that's come most to people's attention over the last few months has been the fight over the Affordable Care Act and whether or not we might actually work to improve it. Some might remember I was one of the last people to commit to it because we passed the House bill, which I was pretty enthusiastic about. The House bill was dramatically different, much better than the Senate bill. It had national exchanges, which would mean we would have had much larger groups of people with lower premiums. The House bill included my amendment to take away the antitrust immunity of the health insurance industry. And there were many other things in the House bill that were superior, but because Teddy Kennedy died and the Senate works on a 60-vote majority, we got stuck doing the health care bill under reconciliation, just like the Republicans tried to do, where you only need, you don't need 61 votes to pass it. So we ended up with something that wasn't great, but I said if we don't do this now, it'll be like Hillary Care. It'll be another 20 years before we visit it. It's unconscionable for the United States of America to have 40 million uninsured people, which we did at that point in time. So I had great hopes that we would improve it. Unfortunately, didn't act quickly enough, lost the House, and since then the Republicans have had the mantra of repeal and replace. It's now been 7 years and they don't have a replace yet, but in any case, that's kind of where we stand. The House bill, which sometimes I actually agree with President Trump. I think he either called it mean or cruel. I can't remember which. But he was right. And the House bill... this thing moves. Better. Okay. The House bill was really not intended to either improve the situation in the individual marketplace, which is where most of the problems are, and in the exchanges. The House bill was to deliver, more than about $300 billion in tax cuts to the wealthiest among us. That part of the Affordable Care Act was to use private insurance companies, but to make the premiums accessible to people. So there are subsidies for lower and middle income people in these exchanges. And those subsidies were paid for by a 3.8% tax on unearned income, investor income over $200,000 a year. Now remember, unearned income pays much less than earned income. It's something I've argued for years is an anachronism. We should not say that people invest for a living pay a lower rate of taxes than people who work for a living, but that's the system. So this took them up to like 23.8%, which is less than a police captain or a senior teacher would pay in terms of their percentage rate. But they're greatly aggrieved by this. So that was the major focus of the House bill, to repeal that 3.8% tax on income over $200,000 a year. That had 3 results. Well, one is, here's who'd benefit: 200, 250,000, $5,000. Those over $1 million, $55,000. Whoa, here you go. If you're in the 1/10 of 1% and you have an unearned income over $3.75 million, you get a sweet $295,000 tax break. But don't worry, they'll spend it in ways that put people to work, mowing their lawn, waxing their yacht. Now, here's the other side of what would happen. This is the premiums. Now, yes, there would be under their bill, the American AHCA, whatever it was in the House, premiums for the youngest would get out a little bit. That's okay. But for someone at age 40, the premiums go up somewhat substantially. But here's what's absolutely unconscionable. They repealed restrictions on discriminating against older people that were in the Affordable Health Care Act. And so this has confounded me. If you're 64 years old and you have an income of $30,000, your premium would go from $1,700 a year to $16,100 a year. I said, now how's that going to work? So that was in part the substance. The other thing was, of course, it took about 23 million people off of health care, including more than 10 million people off of what's called expanded Medicaid. Here in Oregon, we call it the Oregon Health Plan. There are 560,000 Oregonians who have insurance today who didn't have it before the Affordable Health Care Act, and they're on expanded Medicaid, and under the House proposal, expanded Medicaid goes away. My district, the 4th Congressional District, actually, and this isn't a percent number, this is an actual number, I have the 5th largest number of people on expanded Medicaid in the United States of America. I have 165,000 people in my district on that. Oregon's done a really good job with the program. I also, once you get outside of Eugene, Springfield, and Corvallis, have a lot of areas in my district that are hurting economically, and people are struggling to have health care. Greg Walden, my colleague from Eastern Oregon, who chairs the committee that wrote this bill, actually has the 2nd largest number of people on expanded Medicaid in the United States of America. 185,000 people in his district would have lost their health insurance had this become law. So Trump was right, it was mean or cruel. The Senate struggled with it for quite some time. They went through a number of iterations. As you saw last week, they went through a number of votes. In the end, silent fury resulting in nothing. And apparently they're stepping back. Now the president is threatening. I hope it's not a real threat, just a late night Twitter bluster, but he's talking about removing the support premiums that help lower income and middle income people afford their health insurance. And that would immediately mean there's about 8 or 9 million people in that group who would either not be able to afford probably most wouldn't be able to afford their health insurance without the subsidy. Many would just say, I don't care about the penalties, I got to drop the plan. Probably, I just was hearing a report on the radio on the way over, insurers would flee the market. Now the question is, so that would be a disaster if Trump did that. I don't think he will do that. It would be, I think, also disastrous for him politically, because many people don't know they're on Obamacare, which they hate. They've interviewed people in Kentucky, and they're like, oh, I love Kentucky Care. Well, did you know that that's Obamacare? No, that's not Obamacare. Yes, it's Obamacare is Kentucky Care. It's TennCare. It's Oregon Health Plan. It's all of these things, and most people don't realize it, and now that they're starting to realize it, they're saying, wait a minute, no, that's not what I was talking about. They thought they were talking about Medicaid, and they think Medicaid is welfare. Well, actually, 2 points about Medicaid, then I'll move on from healthcare. But the largest number of recipients and the largest amount of money under Medicaid is spent on long-term care for seniors. 60% of the money in Medicaid goes to long-term care for seniors. Grandma or grandpa is coming home from the long-term care facility if the Medicaid payments go away. And then secondly, the second largest group is kids under age 18, 25%, and then the rest is other people of lower income. So it's a program that's tremendously necessary and beneficial to people. Where we go from here, I'm not sure. I've introduced a bill that I think would be, if they really want to fix it, it's pretty simple. And there are people hurting in the individual market. The premiums are high, especially if you're not getting the subsidy, they're very high, and coverage isn't necessarily great. The House bill had national exchanges, and it also had a national not-for-profit public plan, so-called, that would have been offered. So I've introduced a bill to just say, let's have a national, not-for-profit public plan offered that anybody in America can sign up for, and that would and it would solve the problem for all these people that we keep hearing about. And it's true, we're in counties where there's one or no insurers, and particularly if Trump persists, there'll be fewer and fewer insurers available. So there are ways to fix this. There's a bipartisan group in the House that's proposed some minor changes, at least to keep the system sustainable while we work on bigger changes, but it's not clear whether they want to work across the aisle with us or not. John McCain gave, I think, the greatest speech of his career when he came back. He decried the fact that this had all been developed in secret. We had avoided regular order. There were no congressional hearings. And that we should return to that regular order. So I wish him well in his fight with brain cancer. So that's health care. Number of other things going on. When the president talked in the campaign about a couple of things, I was pretty enthusiastic. One is he talked about NAFTA being the worst trade agreement ever, and I would agree with him, and it became the template for future trade agreements. I helped lead the fight against it. We came pretty close to beating it. If Ross Perot hadn't been so pathetic at debating Al Gore, we would have beat it. We came very, very close. We had about 75–80% of Democrats voting against it. It passed, even though the Democrats were in charge at that point in time, with Republican votes for the most part. Gore and Clinton predicted it would bring 400,000 or 500,000 jobs. They were right. Unfortunately, they are jobs on the other side of the border, where labor is not allowed to organize, where wages are very low, where the companies dump the waste out the back door. They're not subject to environmental laws, and it's something we shouldn't be competing with. And our trade deficits have absolutely become staggering. We actually were running a trade surplus when NAFTA was adopted with Mexico, and a small deficit if we didn't go back that far. But you can see how they've gone since. So I've introduced a bill on the first day of the Congress to talk about the reforms we need in NAFTA and a future trade agreement called the Workers' Bill of Rights. I won't go into the details. But the number one thing is to do away with an extrajudicial private tribunal which can overrule our laws. I'll give one quick example. We had the Jakob-Creutzfeldt syndrome a number of years ago. That is the brain-wasting disease, and it was in Canada, it wasn't in the US, and we didn't want it here. So consumers are saying, could we know where our meat is coming from if they wanted to eat meat? And Congress passed a bill saying, yeah, country of origin labeling of meat. Well, just this last year, we lost a trade dispute under NAFTA, and when I argued with President Clinton's trade representative, I said, you can't have this extrajudicial thing that can overrule our laws. He said, well, it can't overrule our laws. I said, oh, you're right, Mickey. We can pay to keep our laws. So in the decision on labeling of beef, we could have either paid Mexico and Canada $2 billion a year and labeled our beef, or Congress could repeal the labeling requirement. Congress repealed the labeling requirement. I voted against it, and many other perverse things have happened under NAFTA. So one of the critical things is getting rid of these extrajudicial tribunals in Title 19, which has allowed the Canadians to give away their timber to timber companies and then bring that into the U.S. and undercut U.S. producers of softwood lumber. So that's, hopefully will be real. I don't know. Their initial, I'm on a new advisory committee just because I've been there so long on trade, and I've gotten to meet with Wilbur Ross, who I'm actually pretty impressed with, his Commerce Secretary, who knew about subsidized stumpage, knew that Title 19 was bad, knew about the problems of Mexican trucks. But he's being constrained by the White House. But I still hold out hope that we can create and I've given them a template for a new trade model. And then finally, infrastructure, the thing I was most enthusiastic about. I mean, I didn't like the election result, but I said, well, at least we're going to do $1 trillion of investment in infrastructure. Not so fast. So I said, well, I want to help with that. So I put forward 3 bills with Republicans that I wrote. One of them is a no-brainer, except I work in Washington, D.C. And back in the Reagan era, Congress adopted a minuscule tax on the value of every import brought in through a port in the United States, an ad valorem tax. So every time you buy an imported good that came in on a ship, you're paying a little tiny tax. And that money was dedicated to harbor maintenance. While our harbors are shoaling in, our jetties are falling apart, and Congress has diverted $9 billion of that money to something else, and every year it diverts about $1 billion of it to something else. Last year, I got an amendment in a bill out of my committee. The chairman was shocked. I got it out unanimously to say, no, we're going to turn that into a real trust fund, and we're only going to spend the money on the purpose for which it's authorized, and we're going to go out and do all this work in our harbors, create a lot of jobs, make the country more efficient, etc. I got it out of committee. When the bill went to the floor of the House, the Speaker stripped it out of the bill, the one thing they took out of the bill. I've introduced a bill to do that with a member of the House Freedom Caucus, if you're familiar with that. That's the right wing of the Republicans. A guy named Kelly from Pennsylvania. He supports my bill. Second bill is Trump talks about how bad our airports are. Ours aren't, and Portland's about to spend $1 billion on theirs. But around the country, they are a mess. They don't have enough gates. It prevents competition. Some of them are like bad Greyhound bus terminals. And so a fair way to pay for airport improvements is to allow the airport to charge everybody who comes through the door a small fee. In fact, I was the Democratic author of this because I live in Springfield, and Eugene built this nice new airport back just about the time I got elected to Congress. And I said, well, this isn't quite right, because I live in Springfield, and they're paying for it with property taxes, and I use it more than anybody else, and they don't get anything out of me. So we created a program to allow airports to charge a small fee, passenger facility charge. The money has to go back into the airport, can't be diverted anywhere else in the city. And it's been a very successful program, but Congress hasn't allowed an increase in that for about, I think, 17 years. So my bill, with an ultra-conservative member of the House Freedom Caucus, Thomas Massey from Kentucky, would allow airports to raise that fee to do about $34 billion of needed investments. Now, you got to know that the airlines are totally opposed, because they say, look, if you charge somebody $1 to go through the airport, they will never get on a plane again. And I said, really? So I just paid you $50 for my bag, and that's not a deterrent. Oh, no, that's part of the ticket. That's part of the ticket. It's like, I mean, they've got, it's pretty, I mean, it doesn't hardly meet the laugh test, but they're a powerful lobby. So I'm pushing that. And then finally, the big one is what I call penny for progress. We haven't raised the federal gas tax since 1993. 18.3 cents a gallon. I've tried everything I can think of. For a while, I thought I was going to get a barrel tax through, but then, Rahm Emanuel, who was then chief of staff for Obama, said they'll do it in the lame duck. Then we lost the House. That was the end of that. So I tried to go on something very minimal that people can't say, gee, it puts me at political risk. Index the existing gas and diesel tax, construction cost inflation, fleet fuel economy, cap it at 1.5 cents a gallon a year, and then borrow every year for the next 15 years, $30 billion, and pay it back out of that increment, creating no new unpaid for debt or deficit, but getting a $500 billion investment in our crumbling roads, bridges, highways, and transit systems. I mean, our transit systems around the country have a $100 billion backlog just to bring them up to a state of good repair. I mean, it's so bad in Washington, D.C., they were killing